The dining room glows under warm overhead light. Plates clink against the wooden table. Your father reaches across for the salt, his sleeve brushing past your glass of water. Your mother laughs at something your younger brother said, her hand covering her mouth the way it always does. The air smells like garlic and steam rising from the rice cooker, and everyone is talking, their voices layering over one another like a choir that forgot to harmonize. You open your mouth. You tell them about what happened at school today, about the presentation you gave, about how your hands shook, but you finished it anyway. The words leave your lips. You can feel them in the air between you and your family, fragile and hopeful, like soap bubbles floating towards someone who might catch them. No one turns. Your father continues chewing. Your mother is already talking to your sister about tomorrow's dentist appointment. Your brother is scrolling through his phone under the table. The conversation flows around you, a river that simply moves past a stone, indifferent to its presence. You stop mid-sentence, not because someone interrupted you, but because you realize with a coldness that starts in your chest and spreads outward that no one noticed you were speaking. No one knows, you just went silent. You sit there, your fork hovering above your plate, and you wonder if you actually said anything at all. You wonder if you are actually here. This is not the pain of being yelled at. This is not the sharp sting of criticism or the hot shame of punishment. This is something else entirely. This is the sensation of vanishing while still breathing. This is what it feels like to be a ghost at your own family's table. Years later, you carry this invisibility in your body. You walk softly as if the floor might complain. You speak quietly, trailing off at the ends of sentences, giving others permission to talk over you. When someone bumps into you in a crowded hallway, you apologize even though you were standing still. You choose clothing in grays and beiges colors that blend into walls. In meetings, when you speak and someone interrupts you, stop immediately automatically, the way a candle flame dies when you blow on it. You do not fight for your voice. You have learned that your voice does not register in other people's ears. You have become practiced in the art of not taking up space. You have perfected the skill of being present without being seen. The deepest wound is not violence. The deepest wound is transparency. It is being looked through, not at. It is the particular agony of creating no ripple in the emotional waters of the people who were supposed to love you into existence. There is a name for what you experienced, though you may have spent years thinking you invented this particular kind of loneliness. Psychologists call it glass child syndrome. The term was first used to describe children whose siblings were sick or disabled, children whose parents looked right through them to attend to the one who was suffering more visibly. But the syndrome extends far beyond hospital waiting rooms and medical crises. You can be a glass child in a family where no one is sick. You can be invisible simply because your parents were too busy, too self-absorbed, too depressed, or too focused on the child who demanded more attention through bad behavior or exceptional talent. You became transparent not because you were unworthy of being seen, but because the people around you were looking elsewhere. And yet, you question yourself constantly. You have spent years wondering if you are making this up, if you are being dramatic, if you are asking for too much. After all, your parents fed you. They paid for your education. They did not hit you. They did not scream. By all conventional measures, you were not abused. So, why does your chest feel hollow? Why do you sometimes stand in front of the bathroom mirror and whisper your own name just to confirm you are real? This is the cruelest form of gaslighting, the kind you inflict upon yourself. You tell yourself that your pain is illegitimate because it lacks visible bruises. You compare your suffering to others who had it worse and decide you have no right to feel what you feel. You apologize for your sadness as if it were an inconvenience you should have learned to manage more quietly. But listen carefully. The need to be seen is not a luxury. It is not vanity. It is not neediness. It is a fundamental human requirement as essential as food and water and air. A plant cannot grow without light. A human being cannot form a self without being reflected back by another conscious mind. When you were a child, you looked into your mother's eyes searching for your own face. You smiled, hoping she would smile back and teach you what happiness looked like on your features. You fell down, hoping she would rush to you and teach you that your pain mattered. You achieved something small and ordinary, hoping she would notice and teach you that you were capable of creating change in the world. But her eyes were elsewhere, or they were glazed looking through you toward some private horizon of her own worries. You searched for yourself in her gaze and found nothing. No recognition, no mirror, no confirmation that you existed beyond the biological fact of your breathing body. So you learned to question your own realness. You learned that perhaps you were asking too much by simply wanting to be acknowledged. You learned to make yourself smaller, quieter, less burdensome. You learned that the best version of yourself was the version that needed nothing, that caused no trouble that could be safely ignored. You became a child made of glass. Light passed through you. Voices passed through you. Love, when it existed in the room, passed through you on its way to someone else. And you are still learning that this was not your fault. You are still learning that you were never too much. You were simply placed in a room full of people who had forgotten how to see. There is a theory in psychology about how human beings come to know themselves. It was articulated by a psychoanalyst named Heinz Kohut, and it centers on a concept he called mirroring. The idea is deceptively simple. A child does not know who they are by looking inward. A child discovers their identity by watching how other people respond to them. The mother's face becomes the first mirror. When the infant cries and the mother's expression fills with concern, the infant learns that their distress matters. When the toddler laughs and the father laughs back, the child learns what joy looks like on their own face. When the young girl shows her drawing to her parents and they respond with genuine interest, she learns that she is capable of creating something worth seeing. This is how the self is built, not from the inside out, but from the outside in. We become real by being witnessed. We develop a sense of identity through the reflected appraisals of the people who raise us. But what happens when the mirror is broken? What happens when you smile and your mother does not smile back because she is staring at her phone? What happens when you cry and your father does not come because he is watching television? What happens when you achieve something remarkable and the people who were supposed to celebrate simply nod absently and return to their conversation about something else entirely? You grow up with what psychologists call identity diffusion. You have a blurry, uncertain sense of who you are. You change yourself depending on who you are with, not because you are manipulative, but because you never developed a stable core. No one reflected you clearly enough or consistently enough for you to develop a coherent sense of self. You are a photograph that was never properly developed, an image that remains vague and ghostly features barely distinguishable. You spent your childhood reaching toward a mirror that showed you nothing. So, you learned to doubt your own outline. You learned that perhaps you had no outline at all. The family is supposed to be a stage where every member plays a meaningful role. But in some families, the stage is built for only one or two performers, and everyone else becomes part of the backstage crew, existing only to keep the production running smoothly. In narcissistic families, the parents are the stars. The children are the audience. Your role is to applaud, to admire, to reflect back to your parents how special and important they are. If you dare to need attention yourself, if you dare to have problems that require their focus to shift away from their own drama, you are accused of being selfish. You are taught that your needs are an imposition, that your pain is an inconvenience, that your existence should justify itself by serving their emotional requirements. You learn to perform happiness even when you are drowning. You learn to hide your struggles because struggling means demanding resources that are not allocated for you. You become a supporting character in someone else's story, and you learn that this is the only way to remain in the story at all. Or perhaps your family had what therapists call the golden child, and the scapegoat, the sibling who could do no wrong and the sibling who could do nothing right. And you were neither. You were the lost child, the forgotten one, the one who was good enough not to cause problems, but not spectacular enough to earn praise. Every spotlight in the house pointed toward your brilliant sister or your troubled brother, and you learned to navigate in the shadows. You became self-sufficient out of necessity. You raised yourself because no one was paying attention. You solved your own problems, comforted yourself through your own nightmares, celebrated your own small victories in the privacy of your bedroom where no one would hear. You told yourself this made you strong, and perhaps it did. But it also made you lonely in a way that has no easy remedy. Because you learned that asking for help was futile. You learned that your voice did not carry. You learned that you could disappear completely, and the household would continue functioning exactly as it always had, your absence creating no gap, no silence, no void that anyone would notice. So you developed what psychologists might call pathological accommodation. You became a master of not making waves. You learned to sense what other people needed and provide it before they asked. You became hypervigilant to other people's moods, able to read the slightest shift in someone's tone or posture, adjusting yourself accordingly to keep the peace, to avoid becoming a burden, to remain safely beneath notice. You shrank yourself, not just emotionally, but physically. You learned to take up less space. You hunched your shoulders, crossed your arms over your chest, made your body as compact as possible. You learned to walk quietly, to close doors gently, to move through rooms like a breath of air that disturbs nothing. You stopped raising your hand in class, even when you knew the answer. You stopped asking for what you needed. You learned to say, "I'm fine," automatically, before anyone even asked. And somewhere in this process of making yourself smaller and smaller, something strange began to happen. You started to experience what psychologists call depersonalization. You began to feel as though you were watching your own life from a distance, as though you were a character in a movie rather than the person living the experience. You would sit in conversations and observe yourself speaking, but it felt as though someone else was operating your mouth. You would move through your day completing tasks, but it felt mechanical, automatic, as though your body was functioning without your conscious participation. This is what happens when you are not seen for too long. You begin to disappear even from yourself. The boundary between you and the world becomes porous. You lose the sense of being a solid, continuous person moving through time. Instead, you become a series of reactions, a collection of performances designed to meet other people's unspoken expectations. You exist, but you do not feel that you exist. You are present, but you are not inhabited. And yet, beneath all of this adaptation, beneath all of this careful self-erasure, there remains a paradox that you cannot resolve. You desperately want to be seen. You fantasize about being noticed, about someone finally recognizing your worth, about stepping into a room and having people turn toward you with genuine interest. But when it actually happens, when someone does see you, when someone offers you sincere praise or focused attention, you want to crawl out of your skin. A colleague compliments your work and you deflect, immediately crediting luck or someone else's contribution. A friend tells you they admire something about you, and you feel your face flush with shame, as though you've been caught in a lie. Someone looks at you with real attention, their eyes actually focusing on you rather than glancing past you, and you feel exposed, vulnerable, wrong somehow. You find an excuse to leave the conversation. You make yourself small again. You return to the safety of invisibility. This is the fear of visibility, and it makes perfect sense given what you learned as a child. In your family of origin, being noticed was not safe. When your parents did pay attention, it was often critical attention, corrective attention, attention that found you lacking, or perhaps any attention at all felt so unfamiliar that it registered as dangerous a spotlight you did not know how to stand under without burning. You learned that the safest place was the shadows. You learned that if you stayed quiet enough, still enough, small enough, you could avoid judgment, avoid disappointment, avoid the risk of being seen and found wanting. So, you developed a deep suspicion of your own visibility. Some part of you came to believe that there must be something fundamentally wrong with you, something shameful that would be revealed if anyone looked too closely. You came to believe that your invisibility was not something imposed upon you, but rather something you deserved, a natural consequence of your inherent inadequacy. But here is what you must understand. The invisibility was never about you. It was never evidence of your unworthiness. It was a failure of the people who were supposed to see you. It was their blindness, not your transparency. You were never defective. You were never too much or not enough. You were a child who needed to be witnessed, and you were placed in an environment where witnessing did not occur. The mirror was broken, but you were not the thing that broke it. You were simply the one standing in front of it, searching for your reflection, finding only emptiness where your face should have been. And now you are an adult still carrying that emptiness, still uncertain whether you are truly here. You still soften your voice at the ends of sentences, still apologize for taking up space, still feel a jolt of anxiety when someone remembers your name or recalls something you said weeks ago. Because to be remembered means to be real, and you have spent so long doubting your own realness that evidence of it feels destabilizing. You have learned to exist in a state of perpetual self-doubt. You question your perceptions, your feelings, your right to have needs. You compare yourself constantly to others and always find yourself lacking. You dismiss your accomplishments as insignificant and magnify your failures as proof of your unworthiness. You have become the harshest critic of the very self you were never allowed to fully develop. This is the legacy of being the glass child. This is what it means to grow up transparent. Not because you chose it, not because you were incapable of being seen, but because the people around you were looking elsewhere, and you learned to accommodate their inattention by becoming invisible even to yourself. But you are here. You are reading these words or hearing this voice, and that means some part of you is still searching for the mirror, still hoping to be reflected back, still believing that perhaps finally someone might see you as you actually are. There is something you gained in the shadows that others who grew up in the spotlight never learned. When no one is watching you, you have all the time in the world to watch them. While your siblings performed for your parents' attention, while the golden child basked in praise and the troubled child absorbed all the concern, you sat quietly in the corner and you observed. You watched the way your mother's smile never quite reached her eyes when she was pretending to be happy. You noticed the exact moment your father's jaw tightened before he became angry. You learned to read the room with the precision of a scientist, cataloging the subtle shifts in tone, the micro-expressions that flickered across faces, the unspoken tensions that hummed beneath polite conversation. You became fluent in a language most people never learned to speak. You learned to see what people were hiding, what they wanted, what they feared. You developed an almost supernatural ability to understand human motivation, to sense the shape of someone's inner world just by watching how they moved through a room. This was not a gift you asked for. This was a survival skill you developed because you needed to predict the emotional weather in your household, needed to know when to make yourself even smaller, when it was safe to speak, when you should simply vanish into your bedroom and close the door. But it is a gift nonetheless. The writers who capture human nature with devastating accuracy, the therapists who can hear what their clients are not saying, the artists who create work that makes people feel profoundly understood. Many of them learned their craft in childhood, in the quiet corners where no one was watching them watch. They learned to see because they themselves were not seen. They learned to listen because no one was listening to them. You understand people better than they understand themselves. You notice the contradiction between what someone says and what their body language reveals. You sense when someone is performing rather than being authentic. You recognize the masks people wear because you have worn so many yourself. This intimate knowledge of human psychology, this ability to perceive what is hidden, this is what you built in the years you spent invisible. And there is another gift though. It may not feel like one yet. When no one expects anything from you, when no one is watching to see whether you succeed or fail, you have a peculiar kind of freedom. The golden child carries the crushing weight of parental expectations. Every choice they make is scrutinized. Every achievement must meet an impossible standard. Every failure is a family catastrophe. But you are free to fail privately. You were free to experiment, to try things without an audience, to become whoever you wanted to become, without having to perform a role that was written for you before you were born. In the darkness of your invisibility, you could grow in whatever direction felt true. You did not have to be the person your parents needed you to be, because they were not paying enough attention to notice who you were becoming. This gave you room. Room to think your own thoughts, to develop your own values, to build something that belonged entirely to you. You could construct your own world in the privacy of your interior life, a world that no one could touch because no one knew it existed. The golden child is often trapped in amber forever, performing the role of the perfect one, unable to step outside the narrow boundaries of parental expectation. But you could slip between the bars of the cage because the cage was not built to hold you. You were not important enough to be controlled. And here is the truth that may be the hardest to accept. Their failure to see you says nothing about your worth. A painting does not lose its beauty because it hangs in an empty room. A song does not become less moving because no one is listening. You are not diminished by their inattention. You were never the problem. You were a treasure placed in a room full of people who had forgotten how to recognize value. The problem was never your visibility. The problem was their blindness. And you cannot cure someone else's blindness by making yourself smaller. You cannot force someone to see what they are determined to overlook. You cannot earn recognition from people who are looking elsewhere, but you can learn to see yourself. You can become the witness you needed. You can build the mirror that was never given to you. The work of healing from invisibility is not about finally getting other people to see you. It is about learning to witness yourself. It is about becoming the attentive parent you never had, the one who notices when you are struggling, who acknowledges your small victories, who reflects back to you that you are real and worthy and here. This begins with something deceptively simple. You stand in front of a mirror, not to check your appearance, not to criticize your body, but to look into your own eyes. 5 minutes. Just you and your reflection. You might feel ridiculous at first. You might feel an almost unbearable urge to look away. This discomfort is not random. You have spent your entire life avoiding your own gaze because you learned that you were not worth looking at. But you stay. You keep your eyes on your own eyes. And you speak. You say your name out loud. You say, I see you. You say, I see your pain. I see how hard you have tried. I see how much you have carried alone. Your voice might crack. You might cry. This is not weakness. This is the sound of something frozen beginning to thaw. You are giving yourself what no one else gave you. You are becoming the first person who truly pays attention. And you write. You keep a journal not to document events, but to make your inner world visible. You write about the feeling you cannot name, the sadness that has no clear source, the anger you have been taught to suppress. You write about the memory of sitting at that dinner table, about the moment you stopped mid-sentence, about the years you spent wondering if you were real. You put your invisibility into words, and the words become proof. Proof that you existed. Proof that what you experienced was real. Proof that your pain was not imagined, not exaggerated, not too much. Every sentence you write is an act of self-creation. You are drawing your own outline, filling in the details that were always there, but never acknowledged. You are becoming solid. You are becoming undeniable, at least to yourself. And then you begin the harder work of taking up space in the physical world. You have spent decades making yourself smaller, and now you must practice the radical act of existing at your full size. This feels dangerous. Every cell in your body has been trained to minimize, to shrink, to apologize for your presence. But you start small. You walk down the sidewalk without automatically stepping aside for everyone who approaches. You sit in a chair without curling into yourself, without crossing your arms, without trying to occupy as little space as possible. You let your body be the size it actually is. You try wearing a color that draws attention. Red perhaps, yellow. Something that announces rather than conceals. The first time you wear it, you feel exposed as though you are breaking an unspoken rule. You are. The rule that said you should remain unnoticed. But you wear it anyway. You let yourself be seen, even though being seen still feels like standing naked in a crowded room. You practice speaking at a normal volume, instead of the whisper you have perfected. When you talk, you do not trail off at the end of your sentences, offering others the opportunity to interrupt. You finish your thoughts. You claim your words. And when someone does interrupt you, when someone talks over you the way people have talked over you, your entire life, you do something new. You stop them, gently but firmly. You say, "Excuse me, I wasn't finished." The first time you say this, your hands might shake, your voice might quaver, but you say it. You assert that your words matter, that your thoughts deserve to be completed, that you have a right to be heard. This will feel unnatural for a long time. You will feel like you are being rude, demanding too much. This is because you have been taught that your needs are an imposition, but you keep practicing. You keep taking up space. You keep insisting on your own presence until it begins to feel less like an act of rebellion and more like a simple fact. You are here, you exist, you matter, and you seek out people who know how to see. Not everyone is capable of true attention. Some people will always look through. You will always be too absorbed in their own drama to notice yours. You cannot change them, but you can choose to spend less time with them. You can seek out the people who listen actively, who ask follow-up questions, who remember what you told them last week, who make space for you in conversation without you having to fight for it. These people become your new mirrors. They reflect back to you that you are worth listening to, that your experiences matter, that you are interesting and valuable and real. This is not about finding someone to save you. This is about surrounding yourself with people who have learned the skill. Your parents never mastered the skill of paying attention to another human being. You might also find witnessing in creative expression. You paint, and the canvas holds the evidence of your existence. You write, and the words on the page prove you were here, thinking these thoughts, feeling these feelings. You make music, and the sound waves move through the air, disturbing molecules, creating actual physical change in the world. You dance, and your body claims, space asserts presence, refuses invisibility. Each act of creation is an act of self-assertion. It is you saying, I am here. I am real. I can affect the world. I can leave a mark. I matter. This is how you build yourself from the inside out, finally, after spending your childhood waiting for someone else to build you from the outside in. This is how you become visible to yourself. This is how you learn that you were never truly invisible. You were only surrounded by people who had forgotten how to see. There is a process in traditional photography called developing. You take a photograph in the light, but the image does not appear immediately. First, it must spend time in the darkroom. The paper sits in chemical baths, seemingly blank, seemingly empty. To someone who does not understand the process, it might appear that nothing is happening. The paper looks unchanged. It looks like nothing at all. But then slowly the image begins to emerge. Shadows first, then definition, then detail. The face that was always there, captured by the camera, but invisible to the naked eye, finally becomes visible. The darkroom was not where the photograph failed to exist. The darkroom was where it was becoming. Your years of invisibility were not wasted years. They were not evidence of your worthlessness. They were the darkroom. You were always there, always real, always whole. You were simply developing in darkness, waiting for the right chemical process, the right conditions, the right moment to emerge into visibility. And now you are emerging, not because someone finally decided to look at you, but because you have learned to develop yourself. You have become both the photograph and the photographer, both the image and the person who brings it into focus. You no longer need someone else's gaze to confirm your existence. You carry your own light now. The child who sat at that dinner table, who stopped speaking mid-sentence, who wondered if they were real, that child is still inside you. And that child needs to hear this. I see you. I see the way you tried so hard to be good enough to deserve attention. I see the years you spent perfecting the art of not needing anything. I see the loneliness you learned to call independence. I see the pain you were taught to call sensitivity. I see all of it, and none of it makes you less worthy of being seen. You do not need to shout to prove you exist. You do not need to perform or shrink or apologize or explain. You simply need to breathe. You simply need to be. Your presence alone is enough. It has always been enough. The stage of your life has been waiting. The lights are ready. The most important audience member, the one who truly matters, has finally taken their seat. That audience is you. And you are ready to watch yourself live. You are ready to witness your own existence. You are ready to step out of the corner, out of the shadows, out of the space between other people's conversations, and into the center of your own story. You were never invisible. You were only unseen. And now, finally, you are learning the difference.